So hi everyone. It's great to be on this conversation with such an eclectic panel. We just had a small little icebreaker call before this, and I was just saying that this panel, each individual here could be going on for a few hours with amazing content, but looks like we have limited time. So we'll try and stay a little focused on the topics at hand. I think given that we're talking about the post-pandemic consumer as a starting point, maybe a few patterns that few people have observed in terms of what the pandemic has changed in terms of maybe consumers' expectations from brands, relationship from brands, expectations from messaging. And maybe I'll just go around the room with that question. And maybe Mohit, you can start with this from your perspective. If what you've seen as a major change.
Sure, Ankur. Hi, everyone. So just a brief about Droom. So it's an e-commerce platform where you can buy, used and new vehicles. So especially, with the pandemic, we've seen major headwinds, right? Because, people want, the need for personal transportation has gone up. And, especially since we are a pure play online platform, the adoption of that, we have seen a tremendous uptick. So people definitely, have been spending more time with us. We've seen a lot of inbound organic traffic coming in, and the engagement levels on the platform, the kind of actions and intent that people are showcasing, that has gone up by quite a lot. So definitely, for our industry, there's been a huge change.
It's all the positive.
Yes.
Would you have the same stance, Smita?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, just a quick introduction for Duroflex as well on the panel. It's a sleep solution brand over 50 years old, and post the pandemic, our Omni journey became much stronger. Our main product category, mattress, which we were really struggling to make conversations. When we say we, not as a brand, but as an industry, we were really struggling to make consumers understand the importance that it's not just a piece of item you're buying in your house, but it really has a deep impact. You're spending so many hours on it. So that was something which didn't probably have a connect with the consumers pre-pandemic, but post-pandemic, we've seen huge engagement, understanding, appreciation from consumers to really know that this impacts their health. So for us, we were able to grow beyond mattress. We were able to add a lot of product categories, nuance consumer needs. We were able to improve our product offering on one side. Obviously, the online fuel that happened to the category, right? This was one of the categories which was not so fast to get onto the e-commerce bandwagon. I think that just fueled. And for brands like us who were prepared to take on that fuel, we really were able to 2x, 3x our growth on month. And today we 25-30% of our business comes from direct to consumer channels. So a lot of change in terms of acceptance or expectations that consumers have from brands. I think it's very important to be authentic and true to what you're saying. Today, consumers don't have patience to look at marketing or communication just as a frivolous activity or as something that's just creative led, right? They don't have the time to really look at products and brands like that. So they're very clear if they're looking at a brand, it's adding value to their life. In either the conversations we are making. So we make a lot of conversations around sleep, which have a lot of content through research, through medical, nuanced medical realities. A lot of things that we do, a lot of research and put it out. So that impacts them. Or you make great products, which again for Duroflex in this category, we believe we make really good products, and it actually has a difference when they do buy it. So and they're able to put it out, right? So today a consumer can go to an Amazon, to a website, put out the review, thrash the brand on social media. The consumer has a lot more control, and with this whole social media e-commerce evolution, it's not only what they're shopping, but finally what they're experiencing with the brand. So it's a lot more unforgiving consumer. It's a lot more impatient consumer, but definitely a lot more connected consumer, even from a geographical connection. We are able to penetrate a lot more. We are able to put our messaging out in a much larger scale. So I think it has all pros and cons. It's really how well you've designed your system, your purpose, your whole brand to go after it. I think definitely the ecosystem is a lot more connected now.
The one word that I picked from that is unforgiving, which is probably where the chances that you have to get the consumer's attention get that much more limited. And maybe on the same note, Bharati might have a bunch of ideas to share from the number of brands that you've seen operate and how their messaging has evolved or how their relationship with consumers has evolved. And who have you seen getting forgiven/not?
Yeah, I should start by saying it's been a very exciting time for us during the pandemic. Obviously, associated with all the challenges that come to all of us being in the pandemic, whether merchants or end consumers or buyers, as we call them. But we've seen some really innovative things done by brands, right? And we have the privilege of seeing really small brands where really the brand is often just an extension of the founder and his or her personality, all the way up to brands like Duroflex, right, who have really taken on this challenge of sort of making this channel their own during the pandemic and come out very successful. So I'll tell you two stories that stay with me in these two completely different segments. The first one on the D2C brand side is I find that really good brands do a great job of focusing on the customer post-purchase. Right? There is so much noise around what you should be doing to acquire one more customer and grow 30% month on month, that there's a lot of attention paid to that. But, recently on a show, I saw Jhaji Pickles and I went and bought a box. I was very happy, of course, to find out they were on Shopify. And, what are the chances I'm going to buy pickles all the time, right? But ever since, they've sent me these amazingly engaging emails with such authentic voice and communication, right? That make me feel like even if I have other choices, I want to go back and try the next product the next time, right? So I feel like brands that focus on post-purchase are doing a great job. And the other example I want to share with you, and maybe Smita, you have even more perspective on this, is, brands like Duroflex, they are household names. They have millions of customers who have used them over decades. And through the pandemic, they have discovered ways to engage with these customers, whether they're in their stores or not, whether they're on their website or not. And that's like a gold mine to start with, right? And in the way that they have innovated to talk to a customer across various touch points has been really amazing to watch with the traditional brands.
And you would agree with her on the customer becoming a lot more demanding/unforgiving front. Is that a pattern you see across brands?
Look, I think that's the reality of being more instant and being e-commerce. To be honest, I think it was a reality even in the past. We just didn't find out so quickly, right? In the past, if you were unhappy, you walked back to the store and you created a ruckus. And that store and that community definitely knew that you were unhappy with them. It's just that it wasn't like 100x the way it becomes today. But I think brands with authentic voices manage this very well. I think consumers understand, and then the percentage of people who are causing trouble or being unfair or unreasonable, I think is still really minuscule. And good brands know how to manage that, and they really come through it.
On the note of good brands, I think that's an opportunity for us to talk about Tata Motors. So, Mr. Rajamani, please, what's your view and the change in consumers' expectations and how you're responding to it?
In fact, last 2 years have really been very challenging. I actually represent something on the commercial vehicle front. And we have one is a pre-purchase of the commercial vehicle. You need to be a part of the consideration set of the customer, and you have to start engaging from there on. So of course, these online sales platform and other things are always there. But how do you kind of teach the customers, to utilize this? Because, this is something which is more like a brick and mortar, and the customer has not evolved to an extent that an FMCG or other segment might have, over last few years on e-commerce. So when you start that on a single platform, you need to have a guy engaged who is just a class 10 pass to a guy who could be an engineer MBA. So that will be the vast expanse on which you have to engage with them. So how do you communicate with them? How do you keep them, glued to the platform? How do you push them to convert their thinking process to another vehicle? Has always been a challenge for us. And over last 2 years, I think we have matured to a great extent with almost every day we have some conversion or the others happening through online. And the more important factor, one of the panel member was mentioning, was how do you handle the post sales? And this, commercial vehicle being one of the after sales, a product wherein you need to be engaged continuously. I think we have come a long way, and let me just quote a little statistics just for the benefit of everyone. Pre-pandemic area, we used to have about 40 lakh trucks coming into our various workshops to get the work done annually. I'm saying, we have almost about 3,000 workshops, each workshop having 5 or 10 vehicle servicing capabilities. Post pandemic, current year, we are likely to cross about 9 million jobs or trucks coming in into our workshop. So that has been the level of engagement that we have, through online, and we have ensured that customer continues to get engaged with us, be it in the booking of the service slots through the platform, or communicating with them that when is their next service due on the vehicle, where they should be going, even if the vehicle is outside. Now that we have the BS6 coming in, which is Euro 6, customer, you know the whereabouts of the customer because of the GPS and all. So wherever the customer goes, you start engaging and pushing him messages saying, okay, this is the nearest workshop, why don't you take your vehicle there? It can be done within 2 hours, 3 hours, and things like that. So this has been extremely personalized, to the extent that a customer would want in his own language. It is not even that only English or Hindi we follow. In fact, we try and speak, even in Kannada or Malayalam, saying, okay, this is where you should be going in. So all this has been a great experience for us. And I think that personalized communication is actually yielding a lot of result for us, as Tata Motors. That is something very interesting.
Very fascinating. Very fascinating. So now I see two ends of the spectrum here. One, we saw the whole authenticity / brand personality / the founders extension coming through. And I see a bunch of brands, and we run a startup program at WebEngage, and a lot of brands tend to struggle with creating consistently high quality content. And now on the other side, you have these very sharp, probably triggered use cases that if you're in a certain geography, then this is a message that would get triggered in your language for you to visit a certain workshop. Now, I'm curious to understand, I'm sure there's no one size fits all kind of approach that can apply. But in your experience, have you seen a fair way for a brand to evolve its journey from a brand-led one message to everybody kind of communication to a one-to-one personalized, which is actually hyper-local in the language, in the context of where the user is? How do you see that the shift being made? Mohit, you've had a bunch of roles in marketing. Maybe you can just take us through a few examples of where you saw this being more powerful, and at what point did you start doing the second one?
Sure, Ankur. So I'll just take a very recent change that we made at Droom. So earlier, we had a very typical e-commerce experience where, all the inventory would be listed and people were free to, use filters and, browse and kind of shortlist, the vehicles they liked and so on, right? Very typical, like you would see on Amazon, Flipkart, etc. And then we realized that, it's a very high ticket item, and, used vehicles are not a standardized product, right? So if you have 6 lakhs to spend, what you will get with a new vehicle, probably a hatchback there are few models that you can shortlist. But as soon as you go used, if you go 3 years old vehicle, then, you can go to a sedan. If you go 7 years old vehicle, you can go to an SUV. So we realized that, this browsing model and, guessing what the customer wants is not working for us. So we moved to a model where, the customer shares a lot of information about the kind of budget they have, the kind of aspiration they have in terms of the vehicles they want, etc. And, then we are able to generate a lot of very targeted recommendations that, you may look at this vehicle, this vehicle, this vehicle. And hence, with this change, this fundamental shift, we've been able to, be very, very targeted with the recommendations, with the offers, with the messaging, that we've been able to offer. And that has seen a huge shift, huge jump in the results. So I think definitely, you need either you use signals like, the time spent on the site, the interactions that are happening, where the user, which pages the user is spending time, or you just ask them, so we took the easy way out. We just ask the user, what do you want? And, we are able to offer a much better experience, because of that.
So you're at the same end of the spectrum as Tata Motors, being hyper targeted, utilizing all the data and all the signals. While do you see a play in between these two at Duroflex, Smita? Because I assume that you had a lot of wellness content, which is applicable to a larger bunch. It's not as sharply targeted to a single user as something else might be. So how do you see that transition / balance playing out?
Absolutely. It's a little different for us, where our categories on the
Sure.
distribution. And this has only got accelerated because of the pandemic. So a lot of things is pretty new from a consumer behavior, even from a brand communication perspective, right? So for us, two most important things as a brand is one, to educate people about the importance of sleep. Second, the importance of the products. Why should somebody spend a 20, 30,000 on a mattress? Why is it worth so much? And what is the difference it's going to make to you? So a lot of product education is required. Unfortunately, for a category across income groups, almost 50-60% of the industry is still unbranded. So even somebody who earns very well in a city like Bombay might be getting his mattress from a local store next door, which
Right.
is extremely surprising. So for us, a lot of common thread is required in communication, which is a lot of education, and that's pretty critical. Along with that, as Bharti mentioned, we are a brand that has served generations, right, and families, and people know about our brand really well. Also, our communication on our products is very targeted, from a consumer benefit. So we're one of the first brands that have reorganized the mattress portfolio from a consumer benefit and not really foam hai, coir hai, or our products are more what is the problem you have, or what kind of age group you're in, what kind of a mattress you want. So Durapedic, for example, is our biggest selling range, which is an orthopedic range, and it caters to a certain kind of an audience. So for those kind of products, it's definitely important, and people are already aware about the brand. It's very important to just be very direct, listen to their problems, give the solution, give the right product in that portfolio, and not talk too much generic, because they've experienced the brand.
Hmm.
So for us, that combination is very important. And to maintain that balance, also there are a lot of categories that we've introduced. So a lot of consumers today, and after 2 years of pandemic, we are pretty strong online also, where the consumers coming repeatedly, buying smaller products like accessories, pillows. So for that, it's important to get onto this hyper personalization, really be very targeted, because you're not going to buy a mattress every year, every 6 months, and it's no point just targeting them on that product. So it's important for us to reach out to them, really basis their previous choice, what have they bought in our core product. Net, I think a brand like ours, which is growing very fast, but in a very, very evolving category, the balance is super critical. And I think probably that's a learning we've had, which has helped us to differentiate a lot.
So where there is education to be done and broad messaging, you will be brand centric. And when there is tactical, very specific hyper one-to-one communication to be done, you would do that as well. So I think that's the pattern which likely would be striking a chord with the bunch of larger brands, or I would say smaller startup brands in your portfolio, Bharti.
Yeah, I think
Because you
that
mentioned the example of Zaji, which is like amazing, but even if that guy abandons the card, I'm assuming there'll be a one-to-one message going out, right?
yeah. I feel like the starting point is to assume that more personalization is always better, right? However, depending on the
Mm-hmm.
stage and scale of brand you are, it's important to balance it with pragmatism. Right. So we find that when brands start, they can be really personal in the message. You might even get like WhatsApps from the founder, right? And it's beautiful at that stage. And that's how it used to be even in the 90s, right? Offline. But as you grow, you add, apps from the partner stores. So you may add email, you may add more personalized WhatsApp flows. There may be other forms you're using, right? And really you have to balance how fast you can grow and execute with how much you can personalize, right? And I think sometimes brands get caught up in, I want to do these 10 things because they look so cool, but you really struggle then to put out a consistent message for the same segment across multiple channels. And you know what? There's a channel born every day that's somehow becoming more meaningful. So I often say to brands like, solve for what stage you're at. And we do see that adoption as brands become bigger. They adopt more and more tools to speak to their consumers. They personalize more, but keep coming back to, are you executing every day in a way that you can sustain, right? That's the first golden rule.
So I think I'm talking to pretty large brands here, right? So there's Tata Motors operating at a fairly complex scale, 9 billion transactions of bookings in a year. And on the side, you have Droom, which is selling a fairly large number of cars. Duroflex is a super large brand. So I would imagine normally that given that large legacy brands who've been able to make a certain degree of transformational effort on getting onto digital, getting ready on the platform, as well as starting to show a meaningful month-on-month growth, you've, I think, embraced technology extremely well, right? And that's where where the maturity of what you guys are applying would likely become role models and relevant points for the remaining bunch of people to follow. Because funnily, as a consumer, I still don't see a lot of brands doing, and I'm in that industry, so it's my job to follow this as to who does what kind of mature play on personalization. But a lot of brands are still stuck in that first name personalization limits. And you have so much more data that's available thanks to the level of transaction history, thanks to the level of even behavior history and what you spend time on, like Mohit mentioned. So you guys actively keep expanding the data sources in this thing? And maybe Mr. Rajamani, you had a point to make on that balance. Do you do any brand-led communication? This was a previous question which I couldn't see a screen on. So the brand-led communication is also part of your stack overall, because you mentioned some very, very tactical, on-point, at location messaging. But would you also look at a larger play around building trust with the service infrastructure? Because that audience probably has an option to choose Tata Motors versus an external local mechanic.
No, we do, because see, what happens is, as you know, our product portfolio is fairly large, in terms of the vehicle, right from half a ton to almost about 55 ton is the spread that we sell. So each of these segment of the product needs to be communicated in a very different way, because my consumers are different, buyers are different. And at the same time, their expectation in terms of after sales would also be different. Downtime will matter to individual segment in a different way. A Tata Ace, if it is down, the owner, he might be earning out of it and eating at the end of the day. If it is down, means he's gone. With regard to, as compared to that, when you look at a large fleet company, even if one or two vehicle is down, you can still manage your show. So these are the kind of different nuances that we as a company need to manage. So what we do is, while we kind of communicate the core values of the overall brand, we kind of personalize it in each of these segments, and then we reach out to them, so that everybody thinks that company is trying to engage with me at a personal level. They understand my own value in the overall scheme of things. And that is how we have been able to not only retain them, but also grow, or their visits to us has been multiplied, over a period of time. That is how it has been done on our platforms.
For this, Fred, I'm actually very curious. What are the channels of communication you're using to get to this audience? Because it's such a diverse base.
So we do. So mainly we are into, while we have the digital online platforms created for vehicle sales, for after sales, and for spare part sales and all, we also communicate through WhatsApp, mails, or even through SMS and all, and then there are some chatbots wherein,
Sure.
we can discuss. Yeah. That's how it is.
Very interesting. So that's where I think the message for the brands is to use your brand story to a certain extent, but the dominant part of your messaging will end up getting personalized. The audience has grown to expect it, perhaps. He's become more unforgiving, like I pick up from Smita. And any further specific examples or pointers? I'm told we have another 5 minutes to wrap. So I was just curious if any of you would like to state any personal anecdote or an example. I remember the Jhaji story pretty well now, but anything else that from your experience seemed to be like a eureka moment for you, which told you something that you didn't probably know before? Anybody on that one? Maybe I can give you a moment to think about it. But
yeah, Ankur,
I
I did want to share, we've seen a lot of traditional enterprises come to Shopify through the last 2 to 3 years, right? And I think till about 2-3 years back, e-commerce for a lot of big brands in India was sort of working with the online marketplaces. But as they have started their own store, right, I've seen that some brands do a great job of using the customers who are already walking into their stores, or customers who purchased from them in the past. It starts with a conversation where, hey, I have 1 million customers whose phone numbers I've had since the 90s. I don't know what to do with them. And then when you feed it into a good technology engine, like your platform, for example, which is integrated with ours, and then you start talking to those customers. And when they come into come into your stores, you identify who they are, use the transaction purchase data, feed it back. The kind of richness that you can create in the conversation is unprecedented, right? Like very few people can do that.
Absolutely.
It's the power of legacy. And I'd really urge more traditional brands to, feel more confident about what they have when they embark on these online journeys, right? There's so many tools they can use to mine into what they've built over many, many years.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add the other side of
That's what I would imagine. Yes,
yeah.
please.
Just the other side of the spectrum too, which is today online is not an online sales channel. It is a place to experience your brand, and our website really fuels a lot of growth offline too. So I think brands should be open to that. That it's not something that has to convert here and how
Yeah.
it is a place where people get familiar with your brand. So the window shopping, the just walk into your store and experience but don't buy. I think all that is getting replaced by online because consumers can't spend so much time into the store. So that's also great benefit that has happened. Really integrated the pre-purchase journey for brands like ours.
Yep. So I think that's where I was about to say that Mohit's running a digital native play, but the remaining two organizations are fairly large, fairly complex, fairly legacy. And hence the transformation and the ability to embrace and deliver with new technologies all the more commendable. Any elements from your playbook that you would want to highlight that this was how you drove this transformation? And it's fairly quick as a journey, right? These things probably take a lot longer, but in your cases, the journey seems to have been pretty short or aggressively driven, perhaps.
Yeah, pretty aggressive. As I said, it was fueled by pandemic. It was some things we
Of
wanted,
course.
but it would have taken us double the time. Also, a lot of us joined just before pandemic, so there was, or on pandemic, the month that it struck. So there was no baggage, right? And it
Hmm.
was also having the leadership fully on board with the idea and ready, and how much of it you can contribute. So I think a very dynamic team, a very legacy, but still a very valuable brand, and people who know the know-how, and platforms like Shopify, which make things very fast. So I think putting all that together really helped us. Pandemic really helped us change consumer behavior also faster. So I think yeah, it was really a few.
So, given the number of years of experience behind you, Mr. Rajamani, I think you would probably be one of the most experienced of our group. And hence, it's also a personal transformation question from your perspective that I would love to spend maybe just another minute on, as to how did you make this whole mental shift from a fairly long amount of experience using traditional media to now talking the super hyper targeted stuff that you're talking about now? What was your playbook in learning this?
So in fact, if you look at Tata Motor has always been fairly innovative,
Sure.
in fact, especially coming in from the chairman, Chandra coming in and, completely transforming the overall group works to, move towards digital and, analytics and data driven decision making and things like that. I think we were already prepared, and we were actually, had the pandemic not happened, even otherwise we would have gone ahead with it to that
Wow.
extent. Let me put it this way. It's just that these 2 years hastened our overall deliverables at the ground level, but we were already preparing our channel partner. As you know, we have a huge network, of people and legacy system, as you have rightly mentioned, 60, 70 years. So we were actually communicating with them, especially coming in from the senior management. So when you have the buy-ins of the senior management, it just percolates down. And in between, you have some good middle managers who will be able to kind of implement it well. It's just that you take off. That's how it happened. Yeah.
You're making it sound like a cakewalk, which I'm sure for a lot of brands hasn't been the case. So thank you, Business World, for curating this panel. It's been very interesting, and I believe we're able to wrap on time. Thank you so much to the panelists for the insights. I'm very impressed by each of your journeys in how the transformation is being implemented. I look forward to having Shopify do a lot more now that you're in charge, right, Bharati? So if there are any questions from the audience, we could do that now, or we could let the next bunch of panelists take over because I see a bunch of you around. And I'm sure the audience has a lot of more interesting stuff coming their way.